interests that we would bring people in to talk to you about. And so you may not have seen the last of us yet. Looking forward, those of you who are longtime NDTDW members know that we've generally given a holiday party. Well, early December seems like a little too early to figure out what we can do with COVID, but we're thinking of doing a New Year's party in January to kick off the election year, to kick off like the energy we need for the midterms, or else we are going to lose. So stay tuned for that.
You also should know that it's coming up time to renew your membership. So Carol will be sending out a letter before too long.
I will, in early November. And if you want to help us get women candidates and candidates who espouse women's issues elected, we can take your membership, which is not that much, and pool it with others and help people get elected. So we hope you will help come and help us do that.
But you can do it online. You can just go to our website, ndtdw.com, and go to membership. And you can either send your money in by a check, or you can pay online.
And if you can't afford to join, tell us. We have scholarships available. We want members. We want people who are willing to go out there and work too. So, and we don't only do straight political things. We have a book club where we discuss books with issues of interest to Democratic women. And so the next one would be November 16th, The Spinoza Problem by Irvin Yalom. And then on December 21, although Lena, you might want to push that back a week. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll look at that.
My First 30 Years by Gertrude Beasley. And I just want to remind everybody that tomorrow is the last day of early voting. November 2nd is the last day to vote. And, you know, I think this is really kind of an important election, because this is the first time I've seen, like, on at least 6 propositions, people going no and yes. And so I think that, and I heard driving back a couple days ago that only 2.3% of the people who are eligible to vote had voted. So first of all, your vote will count for a lot. Second of all, you need to make your voice heard. So please go out and vote. And with that, I am going to introduce Robert Franklin. Bob, who we all know has been a political science teacher at Collin College. He led an award-winning debate group there, and he has worked with the Democratic Party. He is fully versed on all of this and will help us understand it. Bob?
Well, hello all. We've got a small group, but first I'm going to invite you, if you haven't voted yet and you're in this neck of the woods, I'm going to be an alternate judge at Park Hill, and if any of you show up, you might be the only people that show up. This is going to be obviously a very low turnout election. There's not a single candidate on this ballot, and most folks don't think much about these constitutional amendment elections.
When you say alternate judge, do you mean like tomorrow or Tuesday?
Oh, on Tuesday, November 2nd.
Okay. So contact you if they want to be a judge? Alternate judge, or who they contact?
No, we got way more people than we need that'll be working the poll that day.
Okay.
We've got 7 workers, and I'm not expecting 100 people the entire day. So
which is why your vote will count.
Yeah, and you know, for all of you who pay close attention, and for the people you know, you have to get the word out. The fact that Democrats don't vote in some of these small elections is hurting us. It's hurting us a lot. We have to get everybody acclimated to voting in every election. And I understand there are way too many elections in Texas. I think it's by design to turn people off so that only a few people show up for these low turnout expected elections. And this is how they stuff the Texas Constitution with so many amendments.
Okay, Bob, I'm going to just interrupt you for a second. Are
Mhm.
there candidates on here? Because sometimes they have to do multiple appearances. Are there candidates who want
We
to
have two of them here.
raise your hand, say something?
Well, Monique and Amy, I think, are both.
Unmute
candidates.
yourself.
That's
Okay.
exactly what I was about to say. Monique Bracy Huff
Hi.
and Amy.
Okay. Let's let Monique go first and then you, okay?
All right, good evening. I look forward to the presentation because I want people to be as educated as possible on these constitutional amendments because they seem small, but they are actually big. And I will definitely want to comment after we've had our presentation because I'm passionate about some of the issues that are on here. But anyway, my name is Monique Bracy Huff. I am running for judge of Dallas County Criminal Court number 10 of Family Violence Court here in Dallas County. I have an undergrad degree in social work where I worked and interned in domestic violence shelters, did it again during law school, and then I interned in our Dallas County District Attorney's Office when their family violence unit was in its infancy. Then for the past almost 13 years, I've been doing criminal defense work, defending individuals who were charged with family violence crimes. So I have a very holistic view of the issues and all the things that go into the dynamics of family violence, how it affects victims, how it affects those that are accused, and more importantly, how it affects their families and the community. I ask for your vote, starting with early voting for the primary on February 14th. And then if you don't get it in for early voting, March 1st. Thank you for your time and letting me speak at your meeting. Monique J. Bracy Huff for Dallas County Criminal Court number 10. And I'll put my website in the chat.
Yeah, Monique, I mean, we post this on YouTube, and even though we don't get a lot of live people, we do get views. So hopefully we'll get your message out.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much just for the opportunity.
Okay, next.
Hi, I am Amy Thompson Hollins, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak, especially going before the information that is going on brought by Bob, because we understand these constitutional amendments. We've heard a lot about them, and it's important that people have a good understanding. So I'm glad that you guys are discussing it. I am your choice for change in the Dallas County District Clerk's office. I am running because there's some inefficiencies and some non-productivity issues that are making the morale low in the district clerk's office. It's important that the Dallas County constituents get a choice on the ballot and not just elect the same person over and over again because no one chooses to run. I'm running so that the Dallas County constituents get an opportunity to hear from another leader in the community who can come into that department and change it for the better, improving efficiencies in e-filing. And a lot of attorneys will tell you that that has been an ongoing issue. We're going to also improve the interaction between the elected official in the district clerk's office and the judges in the judiciary in the district court. It is necessary for those leaders to have a more team-spirited characteristics that will allow the people that work underneath them to actually work together in order to build morale in the department and serve the community better. So I'm running as your candidate for change in the district clerk's office. Again, my name is Amy Thompson Hollins. I'm a lifelong Dallas resident, graduate of Texas A&M University. and the University of Dallas master's degree in human resources. And I really want to put my expertise to work in that department and change the way they're producing receipts, basically the things that come out of that department, which are affecting the community in a very, very negative way because nothing is being done in a timely fashion. And you know, when someone is due to go to court, they have to have documents processed in a timely fashion, and that is not happening. So again, my name is Amy Thompson Hollins. I'm on Facebook, and my website is also amyfordistrictclerk.com. I look forward to hearing from you all. I'd love to come and speak to you all more in-depthly about my platform. Again, thank you for your time, and I look forward to hearing the rest of the meeting as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, sorry, Bob. I just wanted to make sure they got their message out.
Absolutely no problem. And Amy, I understand that it's no longer going to be called Facebook. They've announced the new name for Facebook.
Yes, they have, and I
Yeah.
bet it's going to be one of those things that formerly known as, and they're going to continue to say the word Facebook, and I think that's what they want people to stop using the word because now it's becoming having a negative connotation because there's so much drama associated with it.
Well, the news I've heard is that its official new name, which is a horrible name, is Meta, M-E-T-A.
Yeah, I know, like that is really unique.
Well, it's two Star Wars. It's two Star Wars, space, Star Trek for me. I needed to have a normal name that people can associate with. And if we remember what Facebook was in the beginning, it was just about posting a picture of yourself. It has come to be so much more. It was literally a book of faces. And now it's a book of debauchery and shame and demoralizing communism, everything that you can think of. So maybe Meta is more appropriate for it because it's way more than just faces.
Yeah.
I think if we have Apple, then maybe we're ready for banana.
Oh yeah, it's okay. It could be a slippery slope. That would be great.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, we've got one of the largest corporations in the world
Yeah.
that has really messed this whole thing up. And instead of fixing the problem, they're just changing the name. So,
Changing the name. It will be more the same because they realize that people will engage and that sells for them. It's just about advertising, you know? So
yeah.
as we segue over, Bob, I want you to be able to have plenty of time for your constitutional amendments, but me and Monique Bracy Hub have been on the trail, and I appreciate you allowing us to jump on and be able to talk early. Both of our campaigns need support, so we appreciate you all allowing us in tonight.
Okay, and as I understand, most of the members will get an opportunity to see it on YouTube as well. So.
Awesome.
All right, so diving in here, there are 8 constitutional amendments. I've got issues about the whole concept of constitutional amendments. The Texas Constitution is either the second or third longest constitution in the United States. The United States Constitution, which is like about 80 years older than the Texas Constitution, has been amended a total of 27 times. The first 10 are the Bill of Rights. So, you know, technically it's only been amended 17 times, whereas the Texas Constitution, about 80 years younger, is now approaching 600 constitutional amendments. It is extraordinarily long. It is ambiguous, and some of these that we're going to talk about today, we'll talk a little bit about the ambiguities. So let me start off with this. First of all, there are 8 amendments that are up for your vote. The Dallas Morning News is saying vote yes on every one of them. I have some personal serious problems with a lot of them, but I'm going to keep this kind of, just giving you the facts and you decide for yourselves. Now, we
It's
start
really
off,
interesting because this is the first time I have seen so many people disagreeing on voting yes or no on, I mean, usually it's like a couple of them. Do you agree, Bob?
I I haven't heard about how many people are splitting on yeses and nos, but in reviewing, what that tells me is that these people have done some due diligence and have gone through and looked at these things. On their face, some of them aren't so bad, but it's when you get into the details, and the details are.
Absolutely.
So the first one, which Dallas Morning News says vote yes on, and it seems kind of okay to vote yes on it, but what constitutional amendment number 1 is about is to add rodeo events for professional for-profit organizations that hold raffles to raise money for their charitable organizations. This is being added on to a constitutional amendment a couple of years ago. And this is why I hate these amendments. Now they're amending an amendment by adding something to it. A few years back, well, maybe it's 4 or 6 years ago, a constitutional amendment was adopted that allowed professional sports teams, for-profit organizations, to hold raffles to fund their charitable organizations, so that this money can be given to whatever organization, charitable organization they're sponsoring. That, if you just left it there, I'd say okay. Here was my main objection to this when it was first passed, is that teams that are members of the National Baseball Association, National Hockey League, National Basketball Association, professional soccer. These organizations, these are the pros. These are the big shots. These aren't the the little what do they call it? The double A farm teams. We're talking about the Cowboys. We're talking about the Rangers. Talking about big organizations. Now, I think it was admirable to say that the Constitution should maybe be amended so that they can run raffles to raise money for whatever charitable organization they are sponsoring. I might not like the particular charitable organization, but this was just that they have the ability to do it. Here was the problem I had when this was first passed. The organization running it, I'm just going to use the Cowboys as an example. So the Cowboys run a raffle for a charitable event. But the Cowboys can keep out of the money that they raise, quote unquote, reasonable advertising, promotional, and administrative costs. Now, the Cowboys can run a raffle and raise $1 million for something easily. But the question of what is a reasonable administrative cost, I don't know that we've gotten a definitive one, but I've heard it could be as high as 15%, which means if they raise $1 million for charity, they just put $150,000 into Jerry Jones' pocket. And that, I think, is wrong. Now, this is to add professional rodeo events to the list of organizations that are allowed to run these raffles. Because understand, raffles in the state of Texas are considered illegal gambling. But certain organizations have gotten an exemption for it, these sports teams. Now, note that non-professional sports organizations, your local high school football team that needs money for their uniforms, they can't run a raffle for this. That's illegal gambling. Your smaller teams, your like your double A farm team or something like that, I'm not sure whether they're allowed to run this raffle. And what really bothers me is college teams aren't able to do the same thing that these professional sports teams are allowed to do. So I had a problem with it when they first passed it, saying that this is just a way of, promotional costs, advertising, administrative costs, all of that can be taken right off of the money that's raised. And who's getting that money? It's the professional sports organization. So
I think you're right, Bob, and I will say, Mike and I are fans of FC Dallas, which is a professional organization, but it doesn't make a lot of money. It doesn't fill the stadium all the time. It's a soccer organization. And right after the raffle was started, they did it the first year, but they haven't done it since then because I don't think it helps these smaller organizations all that much. I think it really helps the bigger ones, and I'm not sure which rodeos it would help.
well, yeah, because there is apparently no, this is why it got left off originally. There apparently is no professional umbrella organization over rodeos. There's I forget the name of it, but it's an organization that kind of sanctions them and says this is an official rodeo event of our organization, but it's not like the NFL. It's not like the NBA. It's not like Major League Baseball. And the fact that you're leaving out very worthy organizations that could use the money. But, most of the money does go to a charitable organization. We don't have any say in what that charitable organization is. I don't really have a problem with that. If you like the organization, buy a raffle ticket. If you don't like it, don't buy a raffle ticket. But it seems to me that this is just another example of what I consider a nuisance amendment. And this is going to be a recurring theme as we go through these. Isn't it a shame that the legislature just can't deal with this directly, that it has to go to a vote and fill up a constitutional amendment election over what appears to me to be nonsense? Anyway, that's the basic story about the rodeo event. It's, once you've got this.
Although, would you agree it's kind of a no harm, no foul? It's not like this is horrible. It's just like sort of stupid.
It's stupid. It wastes the voters' time. The mere fact that it's the first one, and I don't know how it became the first one. I'm sure it was just the first one that was authorized by the legislature. But I can see how this turns people off from going to vote in these elections, saying, why am I taking time out for something like this? Anyway, so yeah, no harm, no foul, but the bigger the organization, the more money the actual organization is going to pocket. The charitable organization gets the rest of it, that's good. And they get the bulk of it, so that's good. But
Tiffany, do you have your hand up?
No, I do not.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. It looked like a hand. Sorry.
No.
okay, so that's enough on amendment number 1. Amendment number 2 allows the county, allows various counties, any county in the state, to finance transportation and infrastructure development or redevelopment in unproductive, underdeveloped, or blighted areas. And again, I think on its surface, this sounds fabulous. That we know, like just Dallas County, I can imagine it's probably as bad or worse in other parts of the state. But in Dallas County, we know that there are blighted areas. Transportation is horrible. And especially in poorer neighborhoods, public transportation is how these people get an opportunity to get to work, at a reasonable expense without having to pay, for a car and for the gasoline and the insurance and all those things. Public transportation is phenomenally important for any community. And the fact that these bonds to fund transportation and infrastructure development have to be for unproductive, underdeveloped, or blighted areas. That's the language that's in the amendment. Here are the problems. No definition for what underdeveloped means. If I owned a vacant lot next to Victory Square, it's a vacant lot. It's underdeveloped. I should be able to get money to be able to develop this thing. I don't think that is the intent, but with no definition of what underdeveloped is, we don't really know where some of this money that is raised through the sale of county bonds is going to go. The second problem I've got is there's no definition of infrastructure. Man, the Republicans are driving us crazy in Washington, saying, oh, you can't do this, it's not infrastructure. Oh, you can't do that, it's not infrastructure. And now they're trying to pass a constitutional amendment saying that it could be used for infrastructure in unproductive, underdeveloped, or blighted areas, and no definition of what infrastructure is. You know, if they use it to fix the water system, great. If they use it to fix the sewer system, great. If they use it to clean up a neighborhood or create some parks, but, you know, is a park necessarily infrastructure? With no definition, some can say it is, and some can say, no, infrastructure is just pipes and electric wires and things like that. And you can't use it for building a park. That's not infrastructure. That's parks and recreation. And that is you know, it's not a
Do
mandatory.
you think the vagueness, Bob, should lead people to vote against it, or is it just something we should be aware of?
I think it's something we should be aware of. And I'm going to wrap this up with a discussion of why these constitutional amendments annoy me so much. And one of them is this issue of the vagueness. You know, the vagueness in the first one, and all of a sudden they say, oops, we left out the rodeo associations. Now we've got to amend we have to amend an amendment to the Constitution to add them. And then some other organization is going to come along and say, what about us? And it's like, are we going to just keep constitutional amendment after constitutional amendment? Now, what's the definition of a blighted area? And what controls or regulations should there be on the money that's raised by a county bond for a blighted area? If you have an area that has a high crime rate, or if you have an area that has a lot of panhandlers, it could be argued this is a blighted area. Tear it all down and build a mall on it, and then everybody will be happy and the tax base goes up. Well, now you're going to displace a lot of people. So I would hope that there would be a definition for blighted area. But again, as Carol just mentioned, when we get to the end, we're going to have a little more discussion about whether these amendments should be less vague or whether they should be vague. So I'll hold off on that. The one good thing that I would say about amendment number 2, it specifically says that the funds that are raised through the sale of county bonds cannot be used to construct or operate a toll road. And I think a lot of us are just fed up with the toll roads anyway. And the toll roads, as expensive as they are a major financial inconvenience to people in poor neighborhoods that need these roads to be able to get to work in a timely fashion. And they get dinged with what initially started out as, what was it, 35 cents when you go through a toll booth. And now I've seen numbers like $3, $4 for every one that you go through. And you might have to go through 2 or 3 of them to get to work. So that's the good thing about amendment number 2, is that it can't be used for toll roads. Number 3 is going to be controversial. They, as you know, with the COVID outbreak, our county, a number of counties around our state and around the nation, have said that religious services where there are large numbers of people gathering, this could be a super spreader of COVID. And so we need to basically say these types of religious organizations shouldn't meet in person indoors because it helps spread disease. So our legislature offers up Constitutional Amendment number 3, which essentially says there can be no prohibition on limiting religious services of religious organizations, specifically including churches, congregations, and places of worship established to support and propagate sincerely held religious beliefs. Again, on its face, this is a country that our First Amendment says that religious freedom shall not be impaired by Congress. Many states read that, or they've adopted similar language in their own state constitutions. It says legislatures and local government can't interfere with religious practice. But, the question is, and as I say, I understand this one is pretty controversial. Does public health, should it weigh more heavily than religious freedom to meet together live in person? Or is this a reasonable restriction during a crisis?
Bob, why would the Dallas Morning News even vote in favor of this, given what went on?
I think the Dallas Morning News has a whole bunch of issues that they're dealing with. One is they rely so heavily, they need readers. And if they were to say no on this, they would piss off a lot of people that believe in religious freedom, and I believe in religious freedom. And there are a lot of people we know that they're refusing to take COVID shots on a religious principle. Not just that it's being, that government might be mandating it, but that their religion says that you trust in God for, protection from these types of illnesses, and it's not something that the government should be involved in. Well, the Constitution of the United States in its preamble says the general welfare of the people is one of the most important things that government is supposed to do.
Exactly.
So you have this balancing act. Now, is this going to severely, if you told these religious organizations, sorry, you guys can meet online, you can meet outdoors under a tent, there are lots of ways that you can meet. We just can't have you physically compact within a building with poor ventilation because that's going to help spread this disease. And from a public health standpoint, to me, that makes perfect sense. You can still practice your religion. You can do pretty much anything you want, just take it outdoors.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, the argument is, what are you going to do in the middle of winter? When it's raining or snowing or very, very cold. I understand these arguments. So now it's a balancing act. What's more important, the general welfare and the general public health issue versus, freedom of religion? And nobody is telling these religions you can't practice what you want. We're just putting what I consider are reasonable regulations on it. And reasonable regulations are always allowed for rights presented under the Bill of Rights. You've got freedom of speech, but you don't have the freedom to start a fist fight. You can't use those fighting words. You've got freedom of speech, but you can't slander or libel somebody without consequences. There are all kinds of regulations on these freedoms, and this seems to me like a reasonable regulation in a health crisis. But if this goes into the Constitution, it's permanent. It's rare that anything gets ever removed. And we'll actually talk about that at the end too. A couple of constitutional amendments that were passed in the 20 years since I've been here that are no longer enforceable under federal law, but the state of Texas continues to have it sitting in their constitution. and we'll talk about that.
I have to say, Bob, this is one where most of the Democratic incumbents and candidates that I have seen have said vote against it because they think that having some reasonable restrictions on packed churches and things should be available to the government.
I'm not in favor of this amendment at all, because I say that the public health is something that outweighs religious freedom. Public health is something, you either have it or you don't. Your religious freedom, does it need to be inside the building or can it be outside the building? Can you hold it in a high school football stadium where everybody's outside? There are lots of reasonable options here. So I would vote no on this myself, but that's me. Because the passage of this is going to undermine any public health crisis that comes up that is communicable, that you can get from being near other people. That this is going to say, well, everybody can still go to church and pass it from one person to another. There are a couple of other underlying issues here that I've got. The actual language is, this would apply to churches, congregations, and places of worship established to support and propagate sincerely held religious beliefs. Does it apply to a church-run daycare center? Does it apply to a church-run camp for kids? Does it apply for those religious schools where it's not the worship that you typically associate with being inside your church or temple or synagogue or whatever? It's like a schoolroom setting. And basically, you can if you were to say that it's okay for schools to mandate masks or to mandate vaccinations in public schools, everybody could run to a private school, a religious run school, and say you can't do it here. And in public health, if you can't do it everywhere, it's almost as if you're not doing it anywhere. So I have serious problems with number 3. And then, how do you define sincere religious beliefs? What if a church is sponsoring some sort of a gun show or gun activity or something? Is that really religion, or are we talking about a Second Amendment issue here? What if it's protests against protected acts, currently protected acts like abortion? Is this really a political thing in the guise of religion? And should these be allowed? So again, I have problems with number 3. So to me, 3 is a no. Number 4, and I think this might be of interest to number 4 and 5 would probably be of great interest to Monique. I'm sure she's going to want to have something to say about these. The eligibility, it's a constitutional amendment to change the eligibility for people to be judges and to run for a judgeship. So some of what's in here seems good, but there are a couple of issues. Number 5 has the issues that bother me the most. So what is contained in Constitutional Amendment number 4? It says that to be a Supreme Court justice, you must be licensed to practice law in Texas. I don't have any problem with that. The current law actually says you have to be licensed to practice law. It doesn't say anything about Texas. So they're adding that you have to be that you licensed to practice in Texas. It also says that you have to have been licensed in Texas for at least 10 years. That's a little more problematic. I understand the thinking behind it, which is an attorney should have the experience after 10 years of practice in Texas to know what goes on in a courtroom, to know what practices are the correct practices in a courtroom, what things shouldn't be happening. So I understand the concept of 10 years. It just seems a little long. That some people that would want to run for a judgeship maybe might not have that 10 years of service. So that's you get to decide, is 10 years too much? Is it just right? It's the old Goldilocks thing. Now, nobody can run for judge if they have ever had a suspension or a revocation of their license. Revocation of license, I understand that completely because the law says you have to be licensed. But if your license was suspended and then after the suspension it was reinstated, should that should that prevent you from ever being able to run for judge? So I've got an issue with the suspension part. To be a district judge, they raised it. You need to be licensed and practice in Texas for 8 years. So I have a few minor issues with this one. By and large, I like the idea that they're saying we need to make sure that our judges are experienced. But little things like the 10 years, I think is too much. A good saving grace here is that this only becomes applicable for judges after January 1st, 2025. So since most judges have either a 2 or 4 year term, actually I think they're mostly 4-year terms, it wouldn't apply until the election of 2025. But that's it.
Well, Bob,
Yeah.
isn't it true that right now to be a district court judge in a felony court that makes death decisions, you only need 4 years of practice?
Let's see what it says about district courts. Each district judge shall be elected by the qualified voters. To be eligible, a person must be a citizen of the United States, a resident of this state, no controversy there. Be licensed to practice law in this state, no controversy there. Have been a practicing lawyer or a judge of a court in this state, or both combined, for 8 years. It currently is 4 years.
Yeah, it's currently 4 years. And I have to say, I have a problem with somebody who's only practiced for 4 years in a court that makes death penalty decisions. I'm sorry.
It goes to the experience of the operation of a court, and having that practical experience, and what evidence should be admitted, the proper procedures to follow. So it raises it to 8 years. And again, I'm the first to say I want to make sure that we have experienced judges. So the 8 years on its face doesn't bother me much. But I do know that we have a number of judges that have run in recent elections here in Dallas County that wouldn't have been able to run for this office because they didn't, they wouldn't have had the 8 years at the time they were elected. So this won't do anything to damage them because this doesn't go into effect until 2025. So by then they would have had their 8 years anyway. But for future, if you have a really terrible judge, okay, it's going to sound a little partisan, but I guess we can be a little partisan here, right? So you have a Republican judge who's terrible, and nobody wants to run against him because, in our hypothetical case, Republicans probably have the inside track. Now, we know in Dallas that's not true, but in other places in the state, that is true. And now you're taking people that a more experienced attorney might say, I'm not going to run for judge against this guy for a variety of reasons. I'm probably going to lose. And then I'm going to probably wind up having to practice in front of this judge in the future. And I'm not going to risk my clients and my reputation in the future for that. So you could see that it could have a chilling effect on young, idealistic lawyers that want to become judges. But again, there's the issue of the experience. So that's one you've got to decide for yourselves. So that's the first one of these regarding judges. That's number 4. Number 5, this one I have a problem with, and I feel that this there is clearly a political process at work here, and that just by reading the one sentence that is required to be on the ballot, people aren't going to see this. This is basically giving additional powers to the Commission on the Judiciary, or the Judicial Commission. I forget what their exact name is. But currently, any judge that's sitting, a person can file a complaint, or the commission on its own can start an investigation if they have allegations that maybe a judge has committed some sort of misconduct. So the Judicial Commission can look into that. What this will do is to say that the Judicial Commission is required to look into complaints or allegations against a candidate for judge. And we've seen this kind of dirty trick before. We've seen it in House races, and now we might wind up seeing it in judicial races if this becomes part of the Constitution. I'm a judge, or I'm running for judge. I have an opponent from the other party, and I'm going to file a complaint. Now, he's just a candidate. He hasn't been elected to be a judge yet. I'm just going to file a complaint, and the complaint is sent to the Judicial Commission, and the Judicial Commission has to investigate it. And the very next day, I'm going to start sending out flyers saying, vote for me. My opponent has an investigation against him by the Judicial Commission. I can see that this can be used for lots and lots of dirty tricks. So I don't like that. Now, the second and possibly more important thing to look at, the Judicial Commission. These folks aren't elected by voters. The Judicial Commission has 13 members. 6 of the members will be judges appointed by the Texas Supreme Court, currently 100% Republican. They're gonna pick the people that they know. Now, there are 6 levels of courts in Texas, and the requirement is that one judge is appointed from each of these levels, from as low as the municipal court to the district court to the appellate court, and all the in-between courts, justice of the peace courts. One judge is to be appointed per court level. That will represent 6, but they are all picked, appointed by the Texas Supreme Court, which is currently, and for I don't know how long, been 100% Republican. So right there you have a political component in the judiciary, which should be free from political constraint. Of the remaining 7 people on the commission, 2 of them will be attorneys that have not been a judge. They are appointed by the state bar. I'm hopeful that those nominated people or appointed people by the state bar are going to be good. But then you get down to the remaining 5 members. These will be 5 citizens that are not attorneys and not judges. never been an attorney or a judge. And they are appointed by the governor. It's been a Republican for how long? Yeah. How many terms in a row have we had Republican governors? So the Judicial
Talking about
Commission,
big donors.
yes, so the Judicial Commission consists of 13 people, 6 of them appointed by the Republican Supreme Court, 5 of them picked by the Republican governor, 2 of them picked by the state bar. Hopefully the state bar is like evenly divided between Democrats and Republicans, or at least close. Monique is saying no, it's not. But you can see right here, 11 of them are clearly stacked. And now an investigation can start against a candidate during his period that he's running for the office. It taints that candidate, and there's like no repercussion to the person who files the complaint if it turns out that the complaint is fake. I find that this is a very politically motivated one, the worst of them as far as political motivation. And for that reason only, if it's the Judicial Commission that does these investigations, they're not independent. They are beholden to the Republican Party. And since almost every judge in the state of Texas is elected, if any judge says, the Democrat is okay against a Republican opponent, they're going to primary this guy in his next election. And he's, he might not be able to hold his seat. So, and of course, you see that this is, I think, targeted towards Dallas County, as well as possibly Houston and other counties that are either solid blue or leaning blue, by basically saying that Republicans will decide in your Democratic leaning counties who is to be investigated and who should maybe not be eligible to run for the office. That's just wrong. They're not independent. So I've got a big problem with number 5.
This is one of those that sounds good, but when you look at the facts that you've explained to us, is really horrible.
Yeah, like I say, if they would change it to a commission that we know is independent, that has people on it from both sides, or, I would feel a little better about an investigation like that. This is stacked against a Democratic candidate. If a Republican
What about the issue of they could bring the investigations against candidates? I mean, that's new.
That's the issue.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's what we started talking about. You might not have heard that part. That is the big problem, is that you can taint a candidate in their first election just by filing a complaint and requesting an investigation, and then the very next day putting out in your mailer, you can't vote for my opponent because he's under investigation by the Judicial Commission. That is just dirty tricks. Amendment number 6. And again, this one is sounds on its face perfectly good. It's a little bit of controversy in it, of course. And the controversy that's in it isn't included in the one sentence that's on the people's ballot when they have to vote for this. That one sentence rule drives me crazy. I'm originally from California. If there was a constitutional amendment or some sort of a proposition, any kind of an issue, they would send you a voter pamphlet, and it would have the complete language of what you're voting on, not just a one-sentence synopsis. And then they would give you the arguments pro and con from organizations that are either for it or against it, and then give the other side an opportunity to rebut that pro and con. And all of this would be printed and sent to every eligible voter, which is expensive, but at least this way people will go in and they know what they're voting on, not just a one-sentence synopsis. They know the actual language. And here is where they've hidden some language. Let me read you the actual sentence that's going to be on the ballots. Number 6. Okay, here's the one sentence that's on the ballot that you're voting on. Constitutional amendment establishing a right for residents of certain facilities to designate an essential caregiver for in-person visitation. That sounds great. Problems. Well, first the good part. Every resident of a facility, you're talking about nursing care, long-term care, Alzheimer's unit, a unit taking care of disabled people, either mental or physical disability. Every one of these people has the right to designate an essential caregiver, and that essential caregiver may not be prohibited from visiting that person in person. We know that this arises from the fact that during COVID, there were a number of people that were in nursing homes, and the nursing home said, we can't bring disease in from outside. So no outside visitors allowed. If you want to see your grandmother, go stand by the window and wave at her. And that got a lot of people upset. And I personally understand that. The slight problem here is the language that they didn't mention. The legislature shall establish guidelines and policies and procedures for these care facilities to operate under. So the patient gets to designate somebody, and that's all it says that you're voting for here, is that they get to designate somebody who cannot be denied an in-person visit. But the part that they don't say is, but the state legislature will write the rules, regulations, and procedures for the determination of who is allowed in and who is not. So it can't be, we're not just allowing this person because we don't like him, we're allowing this class of people, or a variety of other ways, but the legislature is still going to regulate one way or another the people or the types of people that are going to be allowed in.
It could certainly be some same-sex people, who have, they're not married, but have, partnerships.
Yeah, now it says that the resident of the facility can designate, they've got the right to designate whoever they want. But what if the legislature says, but it can't be a person that you had some sort of a sexual experience with, that it can't be a person of the same sex. We don't know what those rules and regulations are going to be.
Well, that's interesting, because I thought the problem was it could be somebody who had been exposed to COVID, or, there were no safety regulations, but what you're saying is it's even more insidious.
Yeah, well, what you're saying is what the obvious thing is, well, yeah, the regulation's going to say, well, we're not going to let you in until we take your temperature and we determine you got a fever, so you're not going to come in. That's rational. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, but that's not what it says. It says they can designate someone to come in whenever.
Right. It's that second part. And again, let me read you the exact language in number 6. This is subpart B. Notwithstanding any subsection of this section, the legislature by general law may provide guidelines for a facility, residence, or center described in section A, which is nursing homes and assisted living facilities, etc., to follow in establishing essential caregiver visitation policies. Some of those policies could be rotten. Some can say, yeah, the person's designated and he can come for an in-person visit once every 3 months. And right there, you've kind of violated the whole intent of the thing. And I can perceive of a lot of additional
Yeah.
procedures that they can put in that could, you know, oh, nobody's allowed in that's ever been arrested for a misdemeanor, felony
Right.
conviction, or anything like that, you know. And this is the resident's kid, let's say, or niece or nephew. But still, the state legislature is going to write policy regulations that can overturn the resident's designation. So I'm not thrilled about number 6. Number 7, 7 and 8, these are property tax issues. And again, on their face, I don't have a lot of problems with them. Even when you look deeper into it, I've got some question. But let's take them in order here. Amendment number 7, that the property tax will have a limited exemption for school taxes for the surviving spouse of a disabled person. So if a person is disabled and they have died, and they have a surviving spouse, and there was a home that was owned, if the person who is disabled, or this part I like, if they've reached the age of 65 with no other requirement, or if they are disabled at any age, and they die with the surviving spouse who is aged 55 or older, the school district property tax on the property shall not be increased as long as the surviving spouse continues to reside there. And this is retroactive to 2019. So, a person who's over 65, disabled or not disabled, but either way, over 65, person dies, has a surviving spouse who's at least 55 years old and lives in the property that they own, that the property tax, the school district property tax on the property shall not be increased so long as the surviving spouse continues to reside there. Sounds good. I don't have a problem with this, except why is it just that portion of the property tax that is funding the school district? Why not the whole property tax? Why are they just saying that part? I can see maybe the argument is, well, if the one who died was at least 65 years old and the surviving spouse is at least 55, they probably don't have kids in school. So why should increasing school taxes be, pushed on them? Whereas other things that are funded by the property tax, like sewers and clean water and sanitation, picking up the trash, all of those things, street repairs, that this person would get some benefit out of. So my only problem with this is, why is this limited to just the school district portion of the property tax? But I'm not terribly against this one, other than if they deserve an exemption for one part, why don't they deserve an exemption for other parts? So number 7, I don't think is as controversial. I'm kind of leaning in favor of it. Number 8, the last one, thank goodness we're at the last one. The fatal injury in the line of duty to a member of armed services that leaves a surviving spouse shall receive a property tax exemption of all or part of the taxes unless they remarry after death. Again, seems perfectly fine. But my first objection goes to a public policy issue. So a person in the military has died of a fatal injury in the line of duty. And understand, this language already exists, but they're changing the language. It said fatal injury in active duty. And now they're changing it to a fatal injury in the line of duty, which means that, if we're not in a war situation, but a member of the military dies in a car crash or in a training accident or something like that, that wouldn't have been in active duty. That's now in the line of duty. And so they get this exemption. Public policy issue, though, is essentially saying that, okay, a member of the military has died. It was in the line of duty, be it, injury from war or injury from an accident, a training accident, or anything similar. So this person died and they leave a surviving spouse. That surviving spouse shall receive a property tax exemption of all or part of the property taxes. All or part, it doesn't really say who makes that determination. Unless they remarry after the death. If they remarry after the death of their spouse, then they don't continue to get this exemption. Which, of course, from a public policy standpoint, if I'm the surviving spouse of a person who has died in the line of duty, and I don't have to pay property taxes anymore, but I've fallen in love with somebody else now, I'll just live with them. I'm not going to marry them, because why should I give away my property tax exemption? So you see what I'm saying about the public policy issue there? Is that what we really want to do? Second issue, well, I already said this, it changes existing exemption, which required death in action to a death in the line of duty. My question here, does this include members of the National Guard? What if a National Guard is sent out for a tornado or a flood relief or something like that, and a National Guard member dies? It's obviously in the line of duty, but it's not in any kind of a combat situation. Do the surviving spouses of people in the National Guard get this? It's not clear. And if they do get it, well, why not give the same benefit to a surviving spouse of a police officer or a firefighter who died in the line of duty? Is it that Texas just admires our soldiers so much that they're the only ones that ever seem to get these exemptions, and that other worthy people, like a police officer killed in the line of duty, a firefighter killed during a fire, fighting a fire, these folks, are they less deserving? What about emergency caregivers, the folks that work in the public hospitals that are exposed day in and day out to COVID and other communicable diseases? We know that a large number of them have died. Should their surviving spouse in the state of Texas get this same, or shouldn't they get this same relief? So it seems to me that this is giving an advantage to one group of people without a good reason why, for saying they deserve this more than other people who's had a spouse who's died in the line of duty. So let's see what
So
else.
does anybody have questions for Bob on all of this?
Yeah, I just have a few little things that I just want to wrap up with here. General problems that I have and the need to reform our system. Since constitutional amendments are virtually unchangeable once they are passed by the voters, the only way that you can change it is through another constitutional amendment. The language that they use, and this goes two ways. Sometimes the language is so vague, and the reason for its vagueness is that rather than having to continually keep updating and amending the amendments, this gives us some leeway to adapt change to future circumstances. So the vagueness, there's a benefit to it. But should it be so specific as to require an additional amendment in the future for a changed circumstance? For instance, what they did with rodeos when they had already said it's okay for all the sports leagues. Are we going to get another constitutional amendment saying some other organization should run these raffles as well. These are some of the problems I have. The other is the Texas Constitution. I started out with this. It's one of the longest state constitutions in America. It has nearly 600 amendments, and it results in numerous ambiguities among the different sections of the Constitution. And the Texas Supreme Court apparently twice said, we can't really rule on a constitutional question on this particular subject because there are two contradicting passages in the Constitution. So it's happened twice in Texas history. This document that is so long, I mean, you take a look at the United States Constitution. If you print it out on just 8.5 by 11 paper, you would have a document that's about, I think, 7 pages long. The Texas Constitution of, like, got it right here. If you can see, it's like 350 pages long. Not good. No way that the average resident or citizen of Texas can even know what's in there. At least the Constitution, if you had a good public education, or if you studied this in college or law school, you got a pretty good understanding of what is in the Constitution of the United States. But you
Well,
don't.
Monique didn't have you as a teacher in college, right, Monique?
Well, that's correct. And I was agreeing with him. We study the law school students. We study the U.S. Constitution inside and out. There's an entire course on it that it's like a fundamental of your law school education. But the Texas Constitution, no, there's no course on that. And it keeps changing. And there's so many nuances. All we usually pay attention to in law school is where the Texas Constitution aligns with the U.S. Constitution.
Yeah. And of course, in your instance, when you're mostly talking about criminal court matters, and in criminal court matters, the Constitution, it's the supreme law. It'll supersede anything that Texas does. But in a lot of civil things, that's not the case. So anyway, so I personally think it's time to throw the thing out and replace it with a condensed version. And people say, oh, you can't throw that out. Understand, we're on the 6th Constitution in the state of Texas. 5 other ones have already been thrown out. This one's the worst of them all. So it probably, well, second worst of them all. So it should probably go. Now, and this actually was reported in the newspaper just this morning. There seems to be a concerted effort, especially by the Republican Party, to keep sections of the Constitution that have already been ruled unconstitutional at the federal level, to leave them in the Constitution, not to remove them. And why? It's with this apparent hope that now that they control the United States Supreme Court, those rulings, for example, the Obergefell decision was based here in Texas. It said, the US Supreme Court said same-sex marriage is, it's an equal rights issue, and therefore the Supreme Court or the Constitution of the United States takes precedence. And so the Texas Constitution that says the only marriage that will be recognized between a man and a woman, that's out. Many other states would then say, okay, let's remove that language from our current Constitution. Texas, no, they want to leave it there, because what if the Supreme Court of the United States changes its position? We've already got it on the books. And we're seeing possibly the same issue here with abortion right now, is that they want to keep this stuff on the books because they're keeping their fingers crossed. And, they're not crazy this time. They might get the Supreme Court to change some of these things. I'm hoping that everybody on the Supreme Court has carefully read and understood the concept of stare decisis and precedent, and that you just don't overturn things unless there's a really good, significant reason to do it. Oh, I'm going to give you a funny example about these stupid amendments. The current Constitution, which was written in 1876, has a section in there, had a section in there that established the office of Inspector of Hides and Animals. That was in the 1876 Constitution. I guess in 1876, that was an important thing. You needed an inspector of hides and animals. Starting in the 1950s, most counties don't even have this position anymore. And in between the 1960s and 1986, there was no person in any county in the state of Texas who was the inspector of hides and animals. In 1986, a man ran for the position as a joke, and he won. Well, he didn't have any opposition. So he becomes the inspector of hides and animals. I don't recall what county this was. After getting elected, he got reelected and served for 17 years. And here is an exact quote of what he said about that. He said, "It was the perfect political office. No pay, no responsibility, no office, no nothing." Well, as a result of him in 1986, and he served for 17 years until 2003. In 2003, they started to take a close look at this and said, do we really need a constitutional office known as the Inspector of Hides and Animals? It took a constitutional amendment in 2013 to remove a completely defunct office from constitutional consideration. So, these are examples of the nonsense about these amendments. Last two things I want to talk about. The Constitution of the state of Texas. I'm an advocate of throwing the thing out and starting over again. And here are some of the reasons why. It creates the weakest office of governor in America. And it creates a legislature that meets the shortest period of time of any legislature in the United States. The legislature, as we know, only meets 140 days every other year. And unless there are special sessions called, that's it. And they are so rushed, as we've seen many times, they are so rushed to get things passed that need to get passed. And because it's rushed, they make a lot of mistakes. And then the very next time they meet 2 years later, they have to fix all of the mistakes that they made the time before, pretty much before they can even get to the new stuff that they need to look at. It's crazy. And no state operates with a legislature, especially the second largest state in the United States, legislature that only meets 140 days every other year.
And Bob, just to add on to that, and their terms are only 2 years long.
Yes, well, in the House, in the Senate, they're 4. But yeah, they're short terms, and yeah, so they might, if they get elected to one term, they will serve a total of just 4 months, and that's it. I mean, that's kind of crazy. Now, the governor, in a good way, it's good that we have a Republican governor because he doesn't have much power. But if we had a Democratic government, Democratic governor, he wouldn't have much power either, because here are the limits on the power of the governor. He has the ability to nominate some people, but subject to confirmation by the Senate. So not really a huge power. The big thing he's got is line item veto. They tried to give that to the President of the United States, and the Supreme Court said no to that. That's the job of the legislature. But here the legislature has given the governor line item veto, which means they can pass a budget. And understand the way Texas operates with this 140 days. They pass a whole bunch of laws, and then they adjourn. And these laws are sent to the governor, and he can sign them after the legislature is adjourned. If he vetoes them, they're not there to try and override a veto. So, that's problematic. A power he does have is the ability to call special sessions, and he sets the agenda for the special sessions. We've seen that that's a big deal. He has the power to sign bills into law, and that is really all the power that the governor of the state of Texas has. And
Starting to lose a few people because we're almost done. If anybody has questions, on the amendments, can we answer those first?
Yeah, because I've just got one last sentence. There have been calls to throw out this Constitution since the Great Depression of 1929, when it first demonstrated that it couldn't deal with public crisis like an economic crisis. So I personally think it's time to go. Now, any questions that any of you have about any of these constitutional amendments, I'll answer them the best I can. But as I say, the language is kind of vague. So anybody have anything that they want to ask about any of these amendments? Okay, well, think about them carefully. Do not just vote all yes or all no.
Monique has her hand up.
Monique, yes.
Okay, on the judges' qualifications, as you know, I just want to put out there, and I'm repeating some of the words of Judge Clinton, who's currently residing on Criminal District Court number 1 of Dallas County, is that note lawyer suspensions. Lawyers can be suspended for a variety of reasons, and the portion of the state bar that deals with suspensions and judiciary review, they have a wide range of sanctions in which they can put in place, but the vagueness of this amendment makes the smallest of sanctions have the power to disqualify you from running for the judiciary. So one of the things that Judge Clinton had specifically brought up is that if you don't pay your dues on time to the state bar, of which dues sometimes can appear hefty if you're a private attorney who does not necessarily bring in lots of income, you can have your license suspended. And it's something that's clearly simple to clear up. But again, that would disqualify you from being a judge. And just because someone might have some financial obligations that prohibit them from paying on time, I don't think that should be something that necessarily disqualifies them from being a candidate for judge. It's something that I think the voters should be able to talk about, and if they want to challenge them on it, they can clear that as to why. I also say that these boards that review the suspensions aren't always the most diverse of boards who understand people coming from different backgrounds and different types of practices. Like civil lawyers might not understand all of the problems and the things that a criminal lawyer might deal with, and vice versa. But you might have a board that just is totally civil lawyers or totally appellate lawyers. There's just so many different areas of law that there's the way people get sanctioned. It's just such a vast thing that I think making a constitutional amendment is something we should be very wary of, that includes not allowing individuals to be sanctioned. I also think that Constitution Amendment on qualifications for judges is a direct attack, as Bob said, on counties like Dallas, who have put forth a very diverse cultural minority slate of judges that is unheard of in many of the rural and Republican counties of Texas. So I think these amendments are specifically geared towards attacking us more liberal counties, but definitely our blue counties that we have. So I encourage you to take heavy consideration with these amendments, because as Bob has pointed out when he's talked about the language, that first line, they sound really, really good. But when you start looking at the real words that are there, it makes a big difference. And they're
There's a lot
intentionally
more there.
at the
Yeah.
beginning.
Yeah, so you were pretty much speaking about Amendment 5 or 4 and 5?
4 and 5.
Okay.
I also have a problem with the caregiver stuff, because I think, as was already pointed out, I think it's another attack in which they can, the first line sounds good, but they can attack individuals who have same-sex relationships, and they can attack individuals who are transgender and they don't want those individuals in. And they can also attack just individuals that they think have a criminal record that they don't like. And honestly, while Dallas County is choosing not to prosecute individuals for just possession of marijuana, that's not what's going on in many other counties around the state. So now you have someone that could possibly be limited from seeing a caregiver because they have maybe a criminal record with possession of marijuana on it.
Or an unpaid traffic ticket.
Thank you,
You know?
sir.
Yeah, I mean, that's, but again, and this is one of the things I hate so much about these proposition or amendments, they call them here, is that they give you one sentence synopsis that doesn't really give you the understanding of what's in one case, Proposition 5 is 2.5 pages long, but they give you one sentence about what it is. And that's just wrong.
And
That's
often a misleading sentence, actually.
And what?
A misleading sentence.
Yes. Yeah.
Intentionally deceptive.
Yeah. Now that's another thing. I don't know what they do about it here in Texas, but in California, there was when they gave a one paragraph synopsis of what the proposed amendment was, that they'd print the whole thing for you if you wanted to read it. But they'd also give you just a one paragraph, and that had to be put together by a nonpartisan organization. It wasn't the government that wrote that. And here, it's in the law when they wrote these things that this is the way it's to be presented to the voters. This is the one sentence that they're going to tell you about it. So.
Hey, we're running over time. Does anybody else have a question?
Okay,
and
well,
Monique, thank you. You have a lot of good comments.
And I just want to remind everyone that we did record this meeting. I'll try and get it transcribed tomorrow to be able to be posted on our YouTube channel. As soon as it is posted, I'll put out an email to everybody that got the invitation to come to the meeting that it's there. So if you've been to the meeting, enjoyed the content, and you have friends and relatives that haven't voted yet but are confused or need to be informed, turn them on to our YouTube channel.
We're encouraged to vote because they think it doesn't matter.
Right.
yes, it matters. These things are insidious. Well,
Thank you so much to everybody. Thank you, Bob, for all the hard work. So thanks.
And
we all
for
have a
what he
nice
said,
Halloween. Nice Halloween to everybody.
and he said this would be a short meeting. Ha ha ha.
Yeah. 10 minutes, Bob.
Once I
Really.
start talking, I don't shut up. I apologize for that.
None of us believe 10 minutes.
Okay,
But
did I
thank you so
know?
much. Thank
Okay,
you so
I'm
much.
signing us all off. So
Bye-bye.
night night.
Have a good evening. Thank you.
Bye.